Hello! I'm here to talk about the 4 rules of glazing pottery. So today we're going to learn a couple of the rules, which I can go over very quickly. And these rules help us manage to get some really beautiful pieces of pottery with wonderful craftsmanship. So one of the things that you have to think about is the depth of color that you're looking for. Now, this particular piece has had about 3 coats of every color on it, and that's why all of these colors are very vibrant and solid looking. So you don't see any spots of white, even though this was a white clay. You don't see any spots like that, and it's got a beautiful finish to it. Now, in this piece, you can see that we only have 1 coat, and it was kind of sloppy. There's a lot of white spots, even with this this little birdie that fell out. There's a lot of spots in here that still needed to be coated, and then of course all around the edges needed to be coated. It's still very sharp. And so what we need to do is we need to talk about the dabbing technique, and the dabbing technique is going to be something that I can show you on these other projects here. When it comes to the glazes being in this ice cube tray or in a paint palette, we don't want to mix the colors. We need to be very careful not to mix the colors, because we can actually preserve this glaze for about 2 weeks in a container like this, as long as you have a container lid, which I do. So to get started, you're going to need a paper towel, a glass of water, and a couple different size paintbrushes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this flat medallion here, and we can start by taking a color. And for the dabbing technique, you start in the middle of the area that has the most space, and you want to grab quite a bit of paint, and you actually just dab your brush, just like it talks about, just like it says, into all of those little creases and crevices. So you just take this and you start dabbing. What I love about glazes is when they dry, they start to look chalky. So it kind of lets you know that it's ready for another coat. And when it's still wet like this, you can always move on to a different area to color until you start to see it look chalky. So that would be 1 coat. And I'm going to move on to a different color since that's not chalky looking yet. So I'm going to take my brush and put it in my water, rinse it off, and then you want to make sure you dry it off so you don't get too much of that water going into your glazes. And now I'm going to go on to another color. Let's get in some blue. And again, you can use the dabbing technique, or you can start off by just painting it lightly and then going into it again with more paint and dab at it a little bit more. So, and you can start to see how the magenta color is actually starting to get chalky looking. So we're just going to keep doing this, adding some more glaze all around. Now any spots that you didn't hit is going to end up staying this color clay, and it's going to have a dry feel to it. It's not going to be nice and shiny in glass like this. So you want to make sure that you get all of the places wet with glaze. There we go. I'm going to rinse my brush off because I'm actually going to take that magenta color again, dry it off on the paper towel, go into the magenta, and now I'm going to try my best to get into these nooks and crannies a little more. You can start to turn your clay just like that. And this would just be coat 2. So of course, if I really want it to be a nice bright magenta, I would have to let it dry, turn chalky again, and paint it one more time. So we didn't mix our colors. We made sure to use the dab technique, and we painted 2 to 3 coats, or at least 2 coats on the magenta. Now, for the 3rd and final rule, one of the things you want to make, for the 4th rule, you want to make sure that you never paint on the back. If you accidentally have some color on the back, or if your piece of pottery moved on your plate and there was a drip of color, you can always take some water on your paintbrush and just kind of scrub at it a little bit. And this will help take off that coat of paint on the bottom, and you can dry it off with your towel. Now, one of the reasons why we don't want any glaze on the back of our pottery is because when we lie it down onto the tabletop of the kiln, it can actually adhere itself to the kiln because it acts as a glue. So glaze is like a fancy glue. When it gets heated up, it crystallizes and ends up turning into a glass. So it's actually melting. And when it melts onto the tabletop, it makes it almost impossible to move it. It's going to be stuck to the tabletop of the kiln. And really the only way for us to get it off is we have to chisel at the piece of pottery, and a lot of times that will actually break the pottery. So just make sure that if you get any type of color on the back or the bottom of your pottery, that you make sure you use your brush and you scrub the color and dry it off with your towel. And that's it. So one more time, the 4 rules of using glazes. 1, don't mix your colors. Make sure to wash and dry your brush before changing into another color. 2, you want to use the dab technique to get into the creases and crevices of any piece of pottery. 3, you also want to make sure that you add 2 to 3 coats if you're looking to get a nice glaze instead of something that looks very washed out. And 4, make sure that you never paint the back of your pottery because you don't want it to stick to the bottom of the kiln. Have fun painting!